This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from Africa and beyond. But first, a quick run through the markets here for you. South African market essentially closed today as the country is marking Heritage Day. Good Heritage Day to you, South Africa. The Kenyan bourse extending the suspension of Kenya Airways shares from trading for another 6 months, essentially into the first quarter of next year. At this point, though, it's still pretty unclear what's the buyout plan for minority investors like KLM, retail investors, as well as a bank consortium that is really the majority shareholder. American equities positive at this point in time, up by at least 1% or so in the Dow Jones, Nasdaq Composite and the S&P 500. On a year-to-date basis, so the S&P 500 barely positive. It has fallen by 6.5% in the last 4 weeks. Here's what's coming up tonight. Egypt's oil output rises to a record level of 64,500 barrels a day. Businesses in South Sudan are crushed as inflation continues to soar. And ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, applies for a tech export license in China. Our starting point tonight is Egypt. The country has achieved a new record for its crude oil production after it exceeded 64,500 barrels a day for the first time, despite the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the North African state has been looking to transform into a regional hub for trade in gas and oil, and it got a bit of a major boost last month after the discovery of 7 new oil fields. With the details, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim.
Egypt's petroleum sector has faced serious challenges in recent years. From 2010 to 2015, all excavations were suspended due to the unrest from 2 uprisings and the war on terror. The government resorted to importing its energy needs, creating a heavy burden on the budget. But the return of political instability has allowed excavations to resume aggressively with unwavering support from the government to the local and international oil companies. And the improved crude production reflects the success of this strategy.
The production of 64,000 barrels per day is a large amount of crude oil not reached before in Egypt. There are also huge reserves of petroleum and natural gas in the East Mediterranean, the Red Sea and the Western Desert. When extracted, we hope we can cover our total consumption in 2 to 3 years. The latest discovery of crude oil, which is one of the 7 new excavations, is in the South Gulf of Suez. It produces about 2,000 barrels per day, but there are reserves of 70 million barrels ready to be extracted.
But the discovery of natural gas by the North African nation has been the turning point.
We had become self-sufficient in natural gas and stopped imports. This has had a huge effect on the economy and citizens, as we are now able to save billions of dollars every year. The money is spent on improving the quality of life of Egyptians by upgrading services of strategic sectors such as health, education and infrastructure.
There was a minor setback in activities during the coronavirus lockdown in April. Oil production dropped by about 50,000 barrels per day compared to April 2019 level. But it has rebounded quickly, and the outlook for the petroleum sector is showing promising signs in the months ahead. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
On to West Africa now. The government in Nigeria has approved a sum of nearly $2 billion to be spent constructing a new rail line linking Nigeria with the Republic of Niger to the north. It's going to be a 248-kilometer rail line. It's expected to run from the northern states of Kano and Katsina in Nigeria and to link up with the city of Maradi in Niger. Now, that decision was announced after the weekly Federal Executive Council meeting chaired by President Muhammadu Buhari and, of course, attended by cabinet ministers in the capital, Abuja. It is projected that once complete, the rail line will assist in moving the supply of crude oil from Nigeria to the refinery being built in the border town between the 2 countries. Now, the Russian-Zimbabwean platinum venture, Great Dyke Investments, has cleared an important hurdle to develop what would be the country's largest single platinum mine. GDI, as it's more commonly known, is 50% owned by Russia's VI Holding and Zimbabwean investors. It said that the African Export-Import Bank had completed a due diligence study that allows it to proceed with a $500 million funding line for the Darwindale project's first phase. The JV, which plans to start mining platinum ore in 2021, has already spent at least $100 million so far just on geological exploration and the construction of 2 mining portals and surface infrastructure. The $2 billion project is located some 65 kilometers from the capital, Harare. It's expected to produce some 860,000 ounces of platinum group metals and gold every year at its peak. Now, that would make it the #1 platinum group metals mine in Zimbabwe. Now, it's worth keeping in mind for this particular story that Zimbabwe is home to the 3rd largest platinum group metal reserves in the world after South Africa and Russia. So how does this change the macro picture for the country? Let's find out. Farai Makutua joins us now live from Harare with more details on this project. Farai, so now that the due diligence has been completed by the Afrexim Bank, what happens next? Do you know what kind of guarantees or collateral the project is required to put up in order to get access to this credit facility?
Well, Rama, I think what happens next now is pitching this project aggressively to potential investors, trying to convince them to put their money onto the ground now so that the next phase of this project can get underway. We do understand that already quite a bit of work is already happening on the ground. Funds to the tune of about $100 million have already been invested and put into the ground there. And that money has already gone a long way in terms of exploration, in terms of training, in terms of plant and machinery. But the point you make earlier about guarantees, I think, is quite pertinent because some of the concerns that investors have raised about the Zimbabwe investment climate, the country risk. The Chamber of Mines said in July that some investors had been holding back their investment because of issues to do with repatriating or taking out their funds and dividends from the country because of the currency issues that Zimbabwe has been facing. And in view of that, some investors have been asking for offshore accounts as guarantees. So we might see that those are some of the issues or options that might be put on the table to give investors comfort and to convince them to back this project.
Indeed. Just to be clear, though, does the government of Zimbabwe have a direct stake in this project? And are there any prospects of listing part of these assets on the ZSE?
Well, Rama, this project is a private project. It is a joint venture between a Russian mining company, VI Holdings, and a private Zimbabwean mining venture, which is called Landela Mining Company. So it is a 50-50 joint venture between those two partners, no government stake whatsoever. And interesting, you talk about listing on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. A few days ago, I had a chat on this program with Uche, where we were talking about the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, which is in the works here. And that is going to be a purely dollar-denominated exchange. And one of these sort of projects are the sort of assets, the sort of listings that BAUS will be looking for. The finance minister specifically made mention of mining investments, saying that because they need hard currency in terms of capital investments, they would be the ideal targets to list on that Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. So indeed, Rama, we do expect that not the ZSE, but the soon to be launched Victoria Falls Stock Exchange will be the ideal location for an investment of this nature. And I'm sure that will be one of the options that's put on the table in terms of raising equity.
Indeed. So the forecast output for this mine, over 850,000 ounces a year. That's nearly double Zimbabwe's current annual output just in the platinum group metal space. What effect would this have, though, on the country's fiscal revenue, assuming that we're working with current prices?
The impact will be huge, Rama. It'll be absolutely immense. Zimbabwe is targeting to raise or to increase the mining sector's contribution to GDP to about $12 billion by 2023. It's a very ambitious target, but I think if
projects like this can get up and running, if the production volumes that are being touted are achieved, then Zimbabwe will have gone a long way in terms of meeting that target. And I think the important thing about the revenue that will be realized from that output, that increase in output, is that it will then be used to incentivize other players. It will then be plowed into other projects that may have been stalled, into other enablers of economic activity such as infrastructure, electricity, for instance. That money, that revenue that comes to government will go into those sectors. It will enable other sectors to perform better, and so it will be a widespread, a ripple effect in terms of the impact of this, not just on mining, not just in the platinum group metal sector, but the entire economy, Ramah.
And one last question for you, Farai. I mean, looking at Zimbabwe, it's home to the third largest platinum reserves in the world after South Africa and Russia. It's got this massive mineral resources endowment, but why are investors so wary of tapping into those resources?
Well, indeed, I made mention of it earlier when I spoke about the repatriation of funds. There was a lot of uncertainty around currency issues in Zimbabwe for a very long time, and there were challenges for investors on the equities market, and certainly in other sectors where investors wanted to get their money out, wanted to get their dividends out, but were failing to do so. And that remains a challenge and a concern for investors. But we also know that there are other issues, the wider, broader economic, social, and political issues. I was just seeing an article where the CEO of Implats, the company that has the majority stake in Zimplats, currently Zimbabwe's biggest platinum miner, he was speaking and saying, look, we are investing, they're expanding two of their mines. They've not faced some of the challenges that investors have faced, but he did say that we could be doing a lot more if the environment was better. So clearly there are concerns about the environment, about the currency, and about improving the ease of doing business. Those are issues that the government certainly says it is working on, and hopefully if they are able to get them right, then we'll see more investors coming through, and projects like the one we've just been speaking about will be a good marker, a good pointer, a good indicator to potential investors that indeed Zimbabwe is committed to reforming and to setting the right sort of environment.
Indeed, and of course on the buyer side, some of those platinum group metals are doing particularly well. Palladium and rhodium are doing fantastically well so far this year. Farai Mukhtar in Harare, thank you. Now, on to Tunisia. The listed telecommunications company with their Celcom has inked a deal with the Chinese mobile phone company Itel to distribute its products in the fast-growing but pretty competitive North African market. Chinese tech firms have gained a sizable foothold in Tunisia's mobile market, where demand for cheap smartphones has been rising very quickly. From Tunis, here's CGTN's Adnan Chouachi.
Tunisia's integrated telecommunication services provider Celcom is intensifying plans to multiply commercial partnerships as it seeks to increase its market share in the extremely competitive telecommunications industry. Celcom, which distributes its products in more than 300 points of sale across Tunisia, has signed an agreement to distribute the Itel brand amid growing demand in the continent.
Celcom used to be a major player in Tunisia since more than 10 years in the smartphone sector, and we are trying to improve our portfolio. So we are collaborating with many Chinese companies regarding this sector, and we are trying to focus on innovations and bringing the value to our customers.
The Tunis Stock Exchange listed firm will distribute Itel's mobile phones amid growing demand for made-in-China brands and products in Tunisia. Itel brand is the second major telephony brand in terms of market share on the African continent and the first in terms of growth.
Mainly, we are trying to improve each time our portfolio, doing partnership with the major actors. As Itel, one of the most growing cell phone and smartphone seller in the continent, but also bringing Infinix as the first experience last 2 years was a major success in the market, and we think that bringing also Itel will bridge a gap for our end user.
The group CEO says the partnership with Itel will not be limited to Tunisia. In fact, Celcom plans to expand its business activities in the African continent.
Basically, Itel is within the continent is focusing on Africa and focusing to get good quality with the right pricing for the African continent. So we think that in Tunisia there is a need for such products as we see demand in the shops.
Mobile and technology experts say the made in China brands guarantee quality as well as the use of the latest technology. Celcom Group, the Tunisian-listed company, is present in Niger, Congo and Côte d'Ivoire. Analysts assert that the recent partnership with ITEL has paved the way for more successful agreements between Tunisian and Chinese groups. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Quick run through some company headlines. A bit of aviation. Let's start with Egypt Air. It has received the 11th Airbus A220-300 from a factory in Canada's Quebec City. The new A220-300 is configured in a two-class cabin layout with 140 seats. 15 of those are in premium economy, 125 are in economy class. Now, Egypt has actually bought 12 of these planes in the deal with the Canadian manufacturer Bombardier. They're designed to be delivered through 2020. This, of course, is part of the airline strategy to upgrade its fleet. On to South Africa now. The Competition Commission has recommended that the Competition Tribunal conditionally approve the Fushini Group's proposed transaction to acquire Jet stores. The Fushini Group had put in an offer to buy Jet from Edcon for cash consideration of about $28.2 million. TFG announced last month that it had concluded a purchase agreement. The cash-strapped Edcon Holdings filed for bankruptcy protection back in April after losing over $11 million during the hard lockdown designed to curb the spread of COVID-19, which has claimed almost 16,000 lives so far in South Africa. Back to aviation. Kenya's national carrier, Kenya Airways, is in discussions to return the leased aircraft in an effort to cut expenses. According to the carrier's managing director, Alan Kilavuka, the airline is negotiating with lessors to be built when the planes are actually flying, not when they're sitting on the ground. The national carrier says one company has already accepted to take back a plane that has not been in use. The low number of travelers reduced available seat kilometer usage to 15% compared to last year, and that's a factor that has forced the airline to cut the number of aircraft in the skies. Kenya Airways expects to return to full operations in 2023. And finally, for us gamers, Microsoft has acquired ZeniMax Media. That name might not be familiar, but you might be familiar with one of the companies it owns, Bethesda Softworks. This is the most expensive video game acquisition deal in history. Bethesda is one of the largest, most critically acclaimed game developers in the world, with a staff of about 2,300 people. It's got an interesting roster of titles in its stable: the Elder Scrolls franchise, Fallout, and Doom. $7.5 billion cash acquisition will boost Microsoft's gaming portfolio, giving gamers something to look forward to in the wake of delays announced on the release of Halo Infinite, which is the biggest single exclusive on the Xbox platform. The deal closes before June 30th next year. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. We'll explore how enterprises in South Sudan are coping as headline inflation soars. And the hospitality industry in South Africa is bracing for return to business on the 1st of October. The details coming up next.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay, we'll head up now.
Beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sudan. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back to the program. Let's head over to Africa's youngest country. The citizens of South Sudan are urging their government to come up with ways of controlling inflation that has soared essentially out of control. South Sudan depends almost entirely on oil sales revenue to finance its budget, but the recent COVID-19 related plunge in crude oil prices and supply disruptions have combined to negatively affect revenue generation. From Juba, here's CGTN's Patrick Oyet.
South Sudan's government has now lifted almost all restrictions put in place due to the coronavirus, but the pandemic pulled oil prices down, the major export commodity for South Sudan. Now the country doesn't have enough foreign currency, yet businesses need to import goods and they need dollars. As a result, commodity prices are rising on a daily basis.
Businesses are opened, schools are opened, but there is no money. The value of our money is gone. The dollar is very expensive. Things are very expensive in the market, yet there's no money. It's as if we are still in a lockdown. There is no money.
The government should have control over the market and prices. Everything is very expensive. When you ask why it's like that, people say it's because of the coronavirus. Prices are not reducing and we are suffering.
Just have a look at these newspapers. The price has gone up and many people are not buying. Money that used to buy 3 newspapers can now buy 1. Things are tough and I don't see a better future soon.
Parts of the country that normally produce food are experiencing the worst flooding the country has ever witnessed. In the capital, Juba, some businesses are now closing their doors.
The Central Bank of South Sudan says its reserves have been depleted due to long years of civil war and the pandemic.
President Salva Kiir appointed a new finance minister and a new head of the country's revenue authority to try and find a solution for the ailing economy.
For the National Revenue Authority to be successful, there is a need for a corresponding success in the other institutions of government, whether it's the Ministry of Finance, whether it's the National Police Services, whether it's the Ministry of Interior, and so forth.
South Sudan's overdependence on oil means other sources of revenue such as taxation are not properly developed. The country's revenue authority is only a year old and it is overwhelmed with demand to generate the required funds. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Right, then a bit of a breaking news story that we're following from Nigeria. We understand there has been a tanker explosion in Nigeria's commercial capital of Lagos. Let me repeat that once again. We understand there has been a tanker explosion in Nigeria's commercial capital of Lagos. Several people are said to have sustained serious burns in the wake of that accident. There are no confirmed reports at this point of deaths in the wake of this incident. The Director General of the Lagos State Emergency Management Agency has confirmed the incident. Olufemi Damilola says that efforts are underway to contain the inferno and rescue operations are ongoing. We'll of course get you more details as we get them in subsequent bulletins. For now, let's move on to a different story. African countries face relatively similar challenges in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, which has adversely affected the economies and their relatively weak healthcare systems. Now, healthcare workers across the continent have faced many shared difficulties as well. Here's CGTN's Angela Coppola exploring some common solutions.
Healthcare workers in African nations have encountered tough times since the first COVID-19 cases were confirmed in their respective countries. Those conditions were made worse in the early stages of the epidemic as there was a global shortage of personal protective equipment, which meant many healthcare workers got infected.
Some governments did make efforts to augment that capacity by either recruiting other cadres of workers who could fill in those gaps, but also probably recalling semi-retired health workers to come and join the response in the different countries.
Complaints highlighting those shortages were raised by healthcare workers in several countries, and they were tackled to a certain extent.
I wish to thank the nation's frontline workers for raising the issue of their safety
and the safety of the environment in which they work so sharply and so consistently. I wish to thank them for their dedication to caring for our people and for the enormous sacrifices they have made.
Healthcare workers became overwhelmed due to the increased workload. Governments stepped in, but there were unintended consequences.
Some services were then neglected, for lack of a better word. There had to be deployment of health workers from other areas of the health service delivery system to focus on the COVID response. So what that means is that the other areas begin to suffer. The other service areas of health begin to suffer.
The pandemic has highlighted critical shortcomings in most African countries' healthcare systems.
Investment in health systems generally, both at the national, subnational, and community levels. I think we need to be mindful of the fact that national level interventions are critical, but those should cascade to subnational and community levels.
There have also been allegations of widespread corruption in healthcare procurement processes raised in many countries. In South Africa, it's been several weeks since President Ramaphosa received the first report into hundreds of PPE supply contracts dubiously awarded, but no action has been taken yet. The lives of healthcare workers on the continent continues to be at risk, and PPE is an important and critical component of their protection. And the big elephant in the room that isn't being discussed is corruption in that space. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
On to Tanzania now. The government over there has rolled out a public services program that aims to solve issues affecting citizens without wasting too much time. It's a 14-day program. It's taking place in Dar es Salaam, and it aims to serve thousands of citizens with a range of needs by putting together public and private sector institutions in one place to simplify the provision of services to the public. Here's CGTN's Noel Makugu explaining how it works.
The One Stop Jawabu program is an initiative created by the Tanzanian government which aims to solve residents' issues without consuming a lot of time.
One Stop Jawabu aims at striving to keep serving Tanzanians. As President John Magufuli's assistants, we are required to keep implementing directives from him. The President always insists that his appointees should go into the fields to serve citizens, and that is what we will keep doing.
Over 30 government institutions have been launched on the program. These include the Revenue Authority, Health Insurance Funds, National Identification Authority and Social Security Funds, among other services. The program has proved to be successful as many citizens have responded to it.
We have served more than 100,000 people in our database. As I speak now, we have served more than 10,000 people between yesterday and today, which is a great number.
Through the program, Tanzanian citizens have been able to interact with government officials who have helped solve their problems within just a few hours.
Considering how offices have been put together, they have simplified services. It is different from regular systems where after you finish your concern in one office, you take a bus to another office. Things have now been simplified.
We thank them a lot for this program. It helped us a lot. I think it should be introduced in rural areas.
The Tanzanian government now plans to come up with more programs of this kind in the near future to help bridge the gap between the government and its citizens. Noel Makugu, CGTN.
And on to South Africa now. The pandemic-battered tourism sector in Africa's most industrialized economy has welcomed a government decision to allow international travel from the 1st of October. Officials, however, are worried that restrictions on key markets facing relatively high infection rates could curtail the pace of a recovery. Just last year, South Africa welcomed over 10 million foreign visitors. Top 10 source markets, which account for roughly 73% of international arrivals, also include current COVID-19 hotspots like the United States, the UK, India and Brazil. Here's CGTN's Julie Shire with the details.
South Africa's hospitality and tourism sector is back in business from October the 1st. Visitors from other African states are all allowed in, but a list of countries from outside the continent is still to be decided.
We obviously hope that our major markets are allowed to travel, but of course it's not simply about a totally liberal attitude to international travel. We understand that tourists need reassurance that safety protocols are being followed and that the destination is going to keep them safe while they're enjoying what we have to offer. So it is important that there are protocols in place.
Beaches, wildlife reserves and other tourist attractions were at a standstill for most of the lockdown. They recently opened up to locals, but it hasn't been enough to offset losses over the last 6 months, especially for smaller operators.
We've had to get rid of, obviously, full-time staff. All our freelance guides haven't had work. We sold one of our vehicles. One of our other vehicles is up in the Mpumalanga coal mines, getting rented out. As soon as the borders are opened up, our whole industry will be reignited. Yeah, as you can imagine, the big ones are Germany, United States, United Kingdom, Australia, all these countries.
Cape Town is usually buzzing with international tourists, but this year it's a little different. South Africa will have to knuckle down to entice visitors to return to its shores as it emerges from one of the world's longest lockdowns.
The individual stories of loss and of tragedy and of crisis, that is obviously something that's deeply concerning to us. The important thing is overall we believe we're going to bounce back strongly as a tourist destination, and that's going to help support the hospitality sector, accommodation and travel.
Global hotel group Hilton is seeing movement rise across Asia, Europe and the United States. Travel in Africa is still subdued.
So you have certain parts of Africa where business is coming back a little bit quicker and where there is a sizable domestic market. You have a few countries in Africa that have reopened, which is very positive. And there are a few countries that are still very restrictive in their allowing tourism and hotels to operate. But across the board, we see a step-by-step improvement.
South Africa's COVID-19 numbers are still the highest on the continent. Infection rates have, however, dropped and recovery rates are slightly higher than in other parts of the world. Judy Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's on the other side. TikTok's parent company has applied for a tech export license in China. And Germany is passing a relatively high budget in order to counter the economic damage inflicted by the coronavirus. Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Welcome back to the program. Let's run through some of the stories making your headlines at this hour. Starting in Mozambique, it's seeking support from the European Union to tackle a wave of militant attacks in the country's northern end. According to Portuguese news sources, the administration in Maputo has written to the EU foreign policy chief asking for help in combating militants who've set up shop in Cabo Delgado. The letter also requests for medical equipment together with humanitarian aid. Elsewhere, Niger's President Mahamadou Issoufou has called for a pure and simple cancellation of debt in order to help one of the world's poorest countries deal with the coronavirus pandemic. In a pre-recorded video statement to the United Nations General Assembly on Thursday, the president said a debt moratorium is not sufficient due to the challenges brought about by the pandemic. And the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has held a joint meeting with the top leadership of Libya's Eastern Bloc. He held discussions in Cairo with head of the Libyan National Army, Khalifa Haftar, and the Speaker of the Eastern Parliament, to seek ways of ending foreign intervention in Libya. That's a run through your headlines. Now, the popular Chinese video app's parent company, ByteDance, has applied for a license in China to export technology. Now, China's Commerce Ministry says the government will review that application. This move comes as TikTok tries to strike a bit of a balance with the US in order to avoid a ban on operations over there. Any agreement, however, needs approval from governments on both sides of the Pacific, both in Washington and in Beijing. TikTok earlier pushed back on the US President Donald Trump's ban by asking a federal court in the US to block the move. TikTok said the restrictions are based on purely electoral politics and not legitimate national security concerns. Turning to the car sector, Tesla, Volvo, Ford, Mercedes-Benz. Now, these are notionally all competitors, but they're working together on something a little different. They've all collectively sued the US government over tariffs imposed on Chinese goods. Car makers are looking to be repaid all of the money they've spent on custom duties with interest. Tesla, in fact, has called the tariffs arbitrary in a lawsuit filed in New York. Now, while Mercedes has accused Washington of prosecuting an unprecedented trade war affecting over $500 billion worth of goods brought in from China. Now, to say that Tesla has had a very wild ride so far in 2020 would be an understatement of vast proportions. Its stock price has more than quadrupled in price, and then it underwent a 5-for-1 split, and still it rose. The share price did drop a bit on Wednesday, though, despite the company's CEO, Elon Musk, laying out some pretty ambitious plans at an event called Battery Day. CGTN's Mark New was there.
Following its annual shareholders meeting, Tesla launched Battery Day. With socially distanced shareholders sitting inside Tesla cars and honking for support, Musk laid out a detailed plan to transform the manufacturing process.
Eventually, every car company will have long-range electric cars. Eventually, every company will have autonomy. I think, but not every company will be great at manufacturing. Tesla will be absolutely head and shoulders above anyone else in manufacturing. That is our goal.
Tesla currently sources batteries from Panasonic, but plans to make new battery cells in-house. They plan to eliminate traditional battery tabs, something Musk says inefficiently increases the distance electrons must travel and also slows down manufacturing. The company says it will eliminate the battery's most expensive material, cobalt, because it is mined under inhumane conditions. Tesla was also inspired by airplane wings for another innovation, incorporating the battery as part of the structure of the vehicle.
We're doing the same for cars. Effectively, the non-cell portion of the battery has negative mass. So we save so much mass in the rest of the vehicle. How do you really minimize the mass of a battery? Make it negative.
As with many things, Elon seems to be a step or two ahead of everybody. I guarantee you other companies are looking at the same stuff. What Elon has figured out is that it's not just a matter of building more cars. It's a matter of building them smarter.
Musk says it will take at least a year to 18 months to start realizing these advantages. As for what it means for future products, Musk says he's confident that Tesla will be able to make a compelling, fully autonomous $25,000 electric vehicle within 3 years' time.
The thing to keep in mind with the timeline that Elon laid out, he's never been on time with any of his products. So if he says a year and a half, 3 years, I would say factor in a little bit of cushion.
Tesla also showed a video of its high-performance Model S Plaid, scheduled to be ready by the end of 2021. The 1,100 horsepower EV features a range of around 520 miles, or roughly 836 kilometers. The Plaid is listed at around $140,000. Mark New, CGTN, Palo Alto, California.
On to Germany now. Authorities there have approved a draft budget that includes the second highest amount of debt that the country would be taking on since World War II. All of this, of course, is designed to contend with the economic damage being inflicted by the pandemic on the German economy, the largest in Europe. Here's CGTN's Mia Alberti from Frankfurt.
After years of strict rules on public debt, Germany has announced its budget for 2021 includes $112 billion of debt. The higher spending aimed at curtailing the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. More than half of the budget is allocated for social welfare spending, such as employment subsidies, reducing health insurance contributions, and increasing ventilation capacity in hospitals.
We will have an extraordinarily large budget again next year and take out additional loans of almost 100 billion, exactly a little over 96 billion. That is a lot of money that we really need to have to help stabilise the economy, but it's also very important.
The shift to a commitment to higher spending will have a wider impact across Europe.
The best student in class, who had always been hammering on austerity, is also doing positive fiscal stimulus. So this is kind of leading by example. So the other European economies and countries can now also continue with fiscal stimulus and at the same time trying to steer the very necessary structural transition that the entire European economy has to go through.
The new budget calls for 483 billion euros in spending, less than 2020, but more than 2019 and previous years. Priorities include artificial intelligence and 5G technology, but also the environment, with investments in hydrogen, solar, biomass and wind energy.
It seems to be the end of Germany's famous Black Zero, its balanced federal budget based on a no-borrowing policy since 2014. But that's actually why the government says it is able to afford this high level of debt right now. But the government also warns that this is just temporary. It plans to go back to a low level of debt by 2024, just short of $6 billion. Germany continues to have the lowest ratio of debt by GDP of the G7 countries, and it is adamant it will continue that way. Mia Alberti, CGTN, in Frankfurt.
On to the UK now. Critics over there are accusing the country's Prime Minister Boris Johnson of sending some pretty mixed and confusing messages. Johnson set out a raft of new coronavirus restrictions for the UK on Wednesday, which include a curfew for the hospitality sector and a call for people to work at home if they can. CGTN's Andrew Wilson reports from London.
Morning rush hour was reminiscent of the lockdown days as the public digested the Prime Minister's latest message and many stayed at home again. The Downing Street push is clearly on behaviours, on jolting enough of a response to allow at least some of the economy to press on.
The reality is there will be stronger enforcement, more powers for the police, higher levels of fines, mainly for the small minority who haven't complied always with the rules. We don't want them to blow it for the vast majority of people and end up in a second lockdown.
Overall, the polls suggest the public supports this, but there is a general resentment over confusion in the messaging.
Yes, I do think it's affected people, and I think the other part that comes into that is just the sheer period of time that's gone through, because I think people have forgotten, because there hasn't been one clear, specific message, that has resulted in the sort of behaviour that we're seeing now, and I think everyone's relaxed.
People are taking advantage of the factors that we have, especially the lockdown factors. People are taking the mickey left, right and centre. It's not under control in any way, shape or form, from what I could see walking around.
All this puts pressure on the Chancellor. He won't be happy with workers staying at home, and already business leaders have started to complain to him about the dangers of economic chaos and mass unemployment. Mr. Sunak's now reported to be looking at alternative schemes abroad, particularly a German-style wage subsidy programme. The furlough scheme ends soon, and the pressure was on the Prime Minister in the Commons.
Don't forget there's the job retention bonus at the end of the year to help people, to help firms to keep people in employment. But also that's why we're looking at a massive package now of investment in jobs and growth in the medium and the short, medium and the long term.
For the public as well, there's a new timeline to digest. 6 months of measures to get the UK through a long winter and out the other side. Andrew Wilson, CGTN, London.
Now, for many of us, this of course has been a very rocky year of pandemic-related educational disruption, and many parents are looking for ways to help their kids continue to learn while at home. Tonight on What's Hot, we'll take you to the New York Toy Fair, where STEM toys focusing on science, tech, engineering and math are proving to be rather popular.
How does a pandemic affect the way children play? That's the question facing the toy industry at the New York Toy Fair as the holiday season approaches. TTPN, a toy industry news and review site, looks at sales figures from Walmart, Target, and Amazon to compile data about what consumers want. The good news for parents is that STEM toys are in, as families look for ways to reduce screen time.
Now, obviously, games, activities, STEM toys are doing exceptionally well. Kids are home from school. You want to keep your kids busy. You want to get them off screens. You don't want them watching TV 24 hours a day. So those categories, families are playing more board games, activities, educational toys are all doing really well.
As lockdowns keep families close to home, they're turning to toys to help cement family ties and keep kids engaged and happy. 7-year-old Lexi loves playing with dolls.
Her hair grows and she will grow with you. What I mean by that is earlier she had a blanket on and then her legs literally popped up and saying, "I don't want it anymore." It was so cute.
Lexi's mom, Jessica, says that imaginative play is important for her daughter during the pandemic.
I don't know if they've changed that much. I think she just cherishes them more. She still loves dolls, and I think I guess animals and dolls probably have become more important to her because it gives her more imagination, like she's dealing with more people than before. So I think dolls have become more important to her.
Industry analysts say games, activity toys, and outdoor toys are also doing well.
Outdoor play like Nerf is also doing very well. It's a big brand year because consumers are buying brands that they're familiar with, and it's a little tougher to break through with a new brand.
As cinemas have been closed during the coronavirus lockdown, demand for toys tied to movies have cooled. Classic brands are doing well, but it's a difficult year for new toy makers to get noticed. But whatever the experts say, as the holiday season approaches, it's the children who will be the real judges. Shen Li, CGTN.
All right, then a quick run through commodity prices. We're going to be focusing mostly on metals this time round. Copper forwards in London down nearly 3%. Platinum, which we spoke about earlier in the hour with respect to Zimbabwe trying to set up its largest single platinum group metals mine. Platinum on the spot market turned positive at 16.04 GMT, up about 1/3%, $846 an ounce. Palladium, another platinum group metal, has been one of the better performers in the year, up over 14%. It did hit a peak of nearly 2,900 back in late February. Brent and WTI, they both dipped in the last few hours. WTI was actually under $40 a barrel at one point. In part, lingering concerns about demand are still weighing rather heavily on markets. Here's what's coming up next. We'll take a look at how a Kenyan farm is turning to soldier flies into sustainable animal feed.
Don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to the program. Now, by 2050, the forecast is that there will be about 9 or 9.1 billion of us on this planet. Inevitably, that means there are a lot more mouths to feed, but we have to do that with a lot fewer resources. Soldier flies, however, might just be an interesting solution to that particular conundrum. Tonight on Grassroots, CGTN's Jen Keo takes up the story of a Kenyan farm that's not only using black soldier fly larvae as an alternative to soy for animal feed, but it's also tackling climate change in the process.
For Talash Hubers and her employees, it's just another day at work. Hubers is the founder of InsectiPro, a Kenyan farm rearing black soldier fly larvae for animal feed. The farm is part of a burgeoning industry, one with the potential to revolutionize our food supplies.
We think InsectiPro is a company of the future because we are aware sustainability and profitability meet. And more importantly, we see the beauty within the beast, and I think you should too.
InsectiPro started 2 years ago. On an average day, the farm processes about 20 to 30 tons of fruit waste and produces 2 to 2.5 tons of larvae. Once the larvae are harvested, they are then dried and turned into animal feed. Any remaining waste is used as manure, some of it on the farm, and the rest is sold to neighboring farmers.
So our waste comes in from all the big markets in Nairobi, from City Park, from Wakulima, from Marikiti. But we also get a lot of waste from industrial juice companies, so companies that make orchid juice, Kevian, all those people, we collect their waste and we bring it to our facility and then we mash it into food for the black soldier flies. Apart from that waste, we also use a lot of brewery waste. So per day we get between 20 to 30 tons of waste, which we then convert into 2.5 tons of end product.
The use of black soldier fly to produce animal feed has been going on in Kenya since 2012. InsectiPro, however, which began with an investment of $850,000, is by far the biggest producer in the East African nation. In the past year alone, the farm trained about 2,000 black soldier fly farmers, almost all being small operations.
The biggest difference is that the BSF manure is the plant converts it very fast, so it's like fertilizer. It's taken up very fast. It breaks into the soil very well, and it also helps the soil maintain a very good texture.
It may be hard to understand the appeal of plunging your hand into a pile of writhing worms. But for InsectiPro, the goal is to triple production by the end of 2020 while leaving a smaller carbon footprint as concern rises over environmental pollution and sustainable provision of food. Jane Keo, CGTN.
And finally, from Tanzania, the country is losing hundreds of thousands of hectares of forest cover every year, mostly due to firewood and charcoal production. Now, in order to stem further deforestation, voluntary groups supported by the government have been experimenting, trying to find sustainable ways of producing biofuel. Now, one group of widows in the country has found a unique way of both supporting each other, but also keeping the environment as it is. Here's CGTN's Daniel Kijo with that report.
Where others see rubbish, Asha Yusuf sees valuable raw materials. She is part of the Staki Shari Widows, a group that converts food and paper waste into charcoal briquettes. The project supports both the environment and the lives of its 15 members. Asha joined whilst battling depression after she lost her husband 4 years ago. She says it's made her life more stable.
The fears I had before have reduced because now I come to work, do the job, I collect waste, and through working at the factory, my kids now can go back to school.
Tanzania has one of the highest deforestation rates in the world. It's estimated that almost 500,000 hectares of forest area are lost each year to agricultural expansion and demand for wood and charcoal as fuel. The Staki Shari Widows believe they can help tackle the problem by producing charcoal in an environmentally friendly way.
In the past, we just threw away the waste, but now what was rubbish is now valuable to us. We use the rubbish to make our charcoal, so to use waste is wealth.
The women say their charcoal briquettes can burn for 5 to 6 hours because they are more dense, offering a more intense form of energy than firewood. Cardboard and paper waste, food peelings that have been thrown away by families around here, are the valuable raw material that this group needs to transform their lives and conserve the environment. Now they say they intend to expand their operations so as to help transform more lives. African Medical Research Foundation, AMREF, sponsored this group and brought charcoal producing machines worth $6,500, which grind soot to form bars from the waste. Now they have a tractor and they can produce 500 kilograms of charcoal a day, worth $130 each day. And they intend to expand even further.
We intend to build a bigger facility that we can use as a dryer so that we can maintain production even when there is no sun or when it's raining.
The Staki Shari Widows Group says this is just the beginning. They want to motivate other widows to do the same, in the hope that they can change lives and the environment. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
All right, then let's wrap up the program and the run through the currencies for you. The South African rand, of course, currency markets weren't exactly trading today. It's a holiday in South Africa. Still essentially at around 17. We'll keep an eye on where this essentially starts to trade and closes tomorrow. In East Africa, Kenya's weekly debt auction was relatively thin. None of the 3 notes in offer managed to actually hit full subscription levels. The state got barely 27% of the $222 million we're looking to borrow. 2/3 of the $61 million raised was focused entirely on the 364-day note with a market-weighted rate of about 7.69%. Kenya is holding its rate-setting meeting, set that for calendars next week on Tuesday. As I run through your currencies, and that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. There are many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.